All right. Well, this is about automated testing Drupal with Behat, which is one of my very favoriteest things. I should probably update this a little bit because my kind of shtick is that really this is about why we need to be doing automation, not so much how to do automation. But I have a very involved and wicked awesome live demo after this that will totally teach you how to do them. So let's get started. And also, I am still a holdover in not creating a proper slide deck and reveal like everybody else does. I just think the book module doesn't get enough love. So, testing. First, who am I? I'm that guy.
Good, Jack.
I was about to say that I'm big in Minneapolis, but I'm not up there. And I'm not wearing the same shirt. Good. So, yeah, I'm Jack Franks. I work for Breakthrough. I'm a team lead, senior dev, architect type, and sort of a zealot for the automated testing. I've got a bunch of gists available to help with the Drupals and testing, and they're available here. And assuming that the video will be properly posted when the camp is done, you can see all this stuff. And then right here, I have a public repository with the live demo site that we're going to go through, which includes a test suite for Behat 2.5 and an identical test suite in Behat 3 that we're going to go and demo and compare. So first, let's start with this short quiz. Who loves manual testing? Good. All right. Are you proper?
Never mind.
Okay.
It's the best way to kill the time. When you don't have anything, okay, let's test something.
All right. So then part 2. Whenever you put out a build, who here is at least 98.0% confident that the new build passes all of the requirements that you have been developing over the last little while, and that you're not reopening any defects, and that you're positive that you are giving QA or your testers or your client a build that works? This guy. All right, so let's talk a little bit about quality assurance. Actually, let me do an impromptu question 3, which I think I'm skipping ahead to do. Who has dedicated testers? What's your sort of ratio tester to dev? Like for instance, I have like on this project I am lone wolfing it, so I'm the only dev, and I have one full-time tester and one part-time tester. What's your sort of ratio?
2 to 1 or 3 to 1.
Okay.
Yeah, usually 30 to 40% of the team size.
Okay.
So if you have 10 devs, 3 testers.
Okay. I'll get to that in a moment then. So what testers do is manual feature testing. It's expensive. It is a human process, so it's error prone. You have to translate your requirements into test planning, and then in order to do it, you have to have a solid test plan. Otherwise, you're just sort of randomly and non-repeatably, clicking out through a site. It is very old school. This should have diminished in importance in about 2006, but is still going strong. Go QA. And this is not anti-QA. I could not be in the spot that I am without all of my my amazing QA. But again, this is taking your requirements and making sure that they are human readable and they're understandable the same way between your QA and your development, and then making sure they all work by hand every time. The next step of that is regression testing. So in addition to all of the many little, actually let me back up again. Who here runs in more of an agile development methodology? Scrum, Kanban, anything like that?
I used to.
Okay. Anyone still on a sprint release schedule? Just me, huh? All right. So we have small feature releases or point releases at the end of every sprint, and then once those all roll up into whatever strategic paradigm the businessy people want to do, bam, full big release. So before every big release, the testers, and in some shops that I've been in, the developers too, have to participate in manual regression testing. And this is going through every piece of the system by hand, making sure that the new view that you've written over here doesn't change any of the old views, or because you changed a field instance setting on such and such a content type, it doesn't change something else where that field instance is used somewhere else. It is awful. Every shop that I've been at that makes developers do this is not a place that I can stay. It's just not, I don't have a passion for it. It's not what I'm good at. It's not my thing. But when you're doing manual testing, this is kind of what you got to do. What regression testing is it's just massive manual testing, just for every feature over and over and over again. So it is more expensive. It is more error prone. Again, oftentimes you have people doing it who don't want to be doing it anyway. It needs a solid test plan. Again, all of this exactly like regular feature testing, but for everything. But there's a better way. Automated testing. Really what this is you're writing code that tests code, or code that tests your site. You're translating those same requirements, and instead of coming up with a human followable test plan, you're translating these into machine-readable test code. So, how do we get requirements from our users, our clients? We user stories, use cases. How do you get requirements?
Yeah. User stories.
User stories, okay.
Interviews with the client, user stories.
Okay. So before you start writing a particular feature, how do you really know when that feature is going to be done?
Planning.
I'm sorry.
It could be agile planning or what, depending on the priorities.
After it's finished with this, like few cases, it doesn't show any bug or something and gets stuck. It's like good for go, I would say.
Okay. So let's take a step back from that. And before you even start writing, how do you know what the thing is supposed to do? Because most of the time our requirements aren't implementation. They are business value. As a shopper, I want to remove an item from my shopping cart so that I don't buy something that I've changed my mind about. When we get that requirement, old school, we got that on an index card. We would kind of start, and then we'd go through and we test it a few times, and then say, all right, good, hand it off to QA, and they'd say, no, that's not good. But when we're automated testing, we're translating our requirements into executable code. So really, it puts us in a mindset that lets us know what the feature is going to be before it's done. It helps us check our requirements. It helps us check our acceptance criteria. It heads us off from stakeholders saying that, no, that's not at all what I asked for. And then, old school, we would test it manually when we wrote it. Again, we'd change our shopping cart, add or delete feature, and then we'd test it. We'd add some items and increment some counts and remove them and come back down. We'd test it. We'd say, good, done. Most of the time, though, as it says, we test these things once we write them, and then they're gone. Now they're in the tester's domain, and we don't ever care about them again until we're going in and modifying the shopping cart directly. Now, test code is repeatable and executable all the time, and it ensures that what we've written matches our expectation of done. So I know that when I'm writing out my test, this is what it means to remove something from a shopping cart, and I can validate it. So a couple of different types of automated testing are unit testing. And it was really difficult for me moving into the Drupal world out of a Ruby on Rails world and a Java and .NET world where unit testing is the way you do it. Unit testing in Drupal sucks. Really, what unit testing is you're testing effectively method by method the objects that you're writing to do your thing. So what a unit test really is a set of inputs and then an expected set of outputs. And then you call the thing with your input, make sure you get your output, and it's pretty well unit tested. You make sure that it handles error conditions okay, and then you can be satisfied that whatever you build on that particular tiny little building block is going to be okay. In Drupal 7, we have simple test. And who's done any simple test? What did you think about that? It's terrible. It's awfully slow. You have to scaffold an entire Drupal site in order to test something. And really what we're testing in Drupal is not, I have such and such an input and then this will generate some error messages based on it. We don't do that. We have, we're testing form alters and we're testing, new custom validation steps and all of that kind of stuff. We're not doing this at a unit test level. In order to really unit test that, and Michelle Krejci, by the way, does a great talk on this. Her PHP spec talk is coming up next, and I highly suggest you go to it if you're interested in any automated testing. So, you can write this out in object-oriented form and then pass in arrays and check your inputs. But again, now you're scaffolding everything. So, yeah, wait for Drupal 8. We've been waiting for a long time. I said that under being recorded. I apologize. And PHP Unit is going to be great. It's fantastic. But in the meantime, everyone paying us is Drupal 7, Drupal 6, worse in some cases. All right, we already talked about testers. I skipped ahead of myself. Now, there's acceptance testing or system testing. Now, for Drupal, this is the easiest way to go because, again, we're in a framework. We're relying on so many things that the app does for us, like build forms. I only want to put my form elements into the array, and I don't want to build that form. Drupal builds the form. Login, forgot password, all of these things. We're not testing these things atomically. We need to test our system. We need to make sure that our behaviors are correct and that the system integrates with everything that we need it to do. So that means for Drupal, the easiest way to do automated testing is acceptance testing. So one of the benefits there, as opposed to those manual tests, is that it is repeatable. Repeatable. You can do the same tests over and over and over again and not miss a step, and they will always come up, well, assuming they don't change, they'll always come up with the same results. We don't ever hand over a build to QA without knowing that it's going to pass. Because, how many people here have ever, Drupal or not, any application, you package up a build, hand it off to QA, and then 5 minutes later you get an email back like, I can't log in. With a suite of tests to run unless it's environmental, and I admit I have taken down QA's environment more times than I can count because of silly little deployment mistakes. Unless it's something like that, the problem is never going to be with your application if you do it this way. This saves QA's time. It saves your time hunting all of these things down. These builds don't get rejected as soon as they're deployed. So let's talk about some other things that automated testing gives us. Workflow automation. One of the projects I was working on last year was a fairly complicated accreditation management system. And to go from being an applicant to being fully accredited and then renewing your license is something like an 18-step process, and each one of those has little sub-steps. When QA we would start working on these in sort of step order. We had skipped some here and there, like let's do the enrollment and then the candidacy and then being accepted, and let's just do the renewing right away, and then we'll come back and fill in the stuff in the middle. But in order for QA to have gotten one of those builds, like now we're going to do renewal. Oh, great. So now every one of these renewal scenarios that I have to test, I have to go and create a new program and enroll it and then make it a candidate and then approve it to be an applicant and then accept the application, and now I can renew them. It took QA 2 days every build to set themselves up with data to the point where they could test the build that by now dev has already replaced with something else. So with any of these scripts, we can automate them all the way up through any point that they want. I had written the one for this one before I was doing Behat, and it was just a set of Selenium scripts that would go through and run through everything and set them up to any step that they wanted. And QA turnaround on those builds went from 2 days of setup and 2 days of testing to come up with defects on one build to being able to do a full run through and a full QA set twice a day. Their setup time went from like 2 full days to about 35 minutes. Developer ramp up is another huge benefit of automated testing, because analyzing test failures is a fantastic way to learn how the system works. You can see where things start to go wrong. You can see what sort of inputs you're checking for, what the behavior of the site is supposed to be, and it gives you a safety net of when you have a new developer in there and they're like, well, I'm supposed to work on renewals. What do I do? Well, go check out the test for renewals. We'll see how the process works, because what that means is in our testing library, we effectively have a snapshot of what those requirements are supposed to look like. It lets them, lets the new developer sort of come up to speed in a more friendly way. For Behat, they're written in sort of businessy English, and they tell us what to expect. But this one is one of my favorites, and it's all about confidence. Again, this is there's a saying where you can be correct, or you can be really well liked, and I am very, very correct. When I put something out, I love having the proof that I can point back to. Say, well, here are my green dots. It worked when I gave it to you. And then it has to actually come up, well, okay, that's not actually what we meant. Like, okay, that's fine. It's Agile. We'll circle back. We'll handle that. But I know that what I gave you matches what I expected it to do. It's proof that you coded it the way you think it's supposed to be. It's proof that who here does a lot of feature merging? It's fantastic, isn't it? Just fills you with glee. So this is proof that you've merged your other devs' features correctly, and that their stuff is going to work, and that if you're building a view feature and they're building a view feature, then they don't collide because both of your tests pass. And you can make really sweeping changes in your app with tremendous confidence, because you have this safety net and see exactly what it affects. For instance, we had a workflow management system, and they decided they wanted to change the role name from author to editor. Now, as we know, those role IDs get generated on site install, and most of the time they're alphabetical, right? So changing, we have other roles in there that come between the A and the E, and it swapped all the role IDs on a new install, and everything broke. In one particular case, the big resource management portal that we had, we're up to like 18,000 test steps, and a role rename made 13,000 of them break. That's how much of the site something like a role name changes. In our site installation, that's fine. Our site installation profile has a bunch of migrations for taxonomy setup and things like that. So, like if we're having a view that filters on terms, all of those term IDs are set, again, by the order in which they import. So if I have to go back into the second taxonomy and add a new term into that vocabulary, and then it still imports all the rest of them, well, now all of my other view filters are wrong. So just adding something into vocabulary number 2 breaks every view that depends on a term filter for vocabulary number 4. Here, I can run a bunch of tests and then see in a minute, all right, here's where they all broke. And this is fantastic, metrics, because I love metrics. Like I said, I love being right. It's a cultural change, and fighting any sort of cultural change is a hard battle. So before I had really been able to push through a lot of the automated test, any test first sort of methodology, we were averaging almost 2.5 defects per story per sprint. There were almost a dozen bugs that got reopened every sprint. Like, we fixed this, it did work, the new build broke it, something's different now. I got my my automated testing stuff going, first Selenium and then Behat, and then we never changed off of Behat because I love it so much. And now we are down to 1 defect per 5 stories delivered. I used to be able to say never, but then I screwed it up, and then I reopened a defect by mistake. Over 12 3-week sprints, aside from the one that I screwed up, we had literally no bugs reopened. Because every time a defect would be logged, the developer would go, and I say a developer, mostly me, I would go and reproduce it. And why reproduce it by hand? I'm going to write a test to reproduce it. So I can take the steps to reproduce that QA gives me, make them, put them into a test, run them, make sure that value is wrong, and then I fix it, and then my test passes. And then every time I do a build, I run that test again, and it will never get reopened because I've already addressed it and I can prove it. But again, it is a big culture shift, and there's a lot of excuses for it. You just got to stop making them. The best time to start doing this, I should probably update this too, because I really, I think my first Ruby on Rails project was something like 05 or 06, and the unit test thing kind of threw me then. I didn't really get it until I was working on my stuff, checked it into Subversion, and another developer said, "Hey, I grabbed the trunk and there's tests broken." Like, oh yeah, I didn't finish what I was doing. I just wanted to commit it to be safe. It's like, but there's tests broken in trunk. I get it. Again, it's proof. I have to show that what I was doing works. I can't put it into trunk when it's not working. That's ridiculous. Ha-ha! And I have saved that light bulb, and I carry it around with me everywhere. So, yeah, maybe it was a good time to start doing it 5-10 years ago. The very next best time to start doing it is right now. Right now. It's never too late. It doesn't matter if you have brand new development. It is, in fact, a little easier if you have brand new development. But if you're working on existing applications, existing sites, it is never too late to start some automation in there. It doesn't matter how large the team is. Again, the more developers you have, the better off you are having it all scripted and automated. It doesn't matter how big the site is. It doesn't matter what you're writing. Automate it. On the flip side, it doesn't matter how small it is either. I get into arguments with people about this a lot. I'm the only dev in here. It's a small site. It's like, they're like $5,000 a year worth of stuff. It doesn't matter. Your velocity, your deliverables, everything will improve when you start to do this. So a small site, small team, tiny feature, doesn't matter. Put a test on it, because pretty soon this will start becoming a part of your life, and you will do this. I was asked a while ago, because I've got to brag and puff up about this. We did a fixed bid, $2.2 million project, just wrapped it up a month or so ago, and we were $500-something thousand under budget. And one of the managing partners came and asked, he's like, "I'm looking at the numbers here, and like your dev burn was 20% less than it was supposed to be. Your BA was a little front heavy, but then like QA went down and dev went down. What? You could do that even though you did all of these tests?" I'm like, no. I can do that because I do all of these tests. I cannot maintain the sort of velocity that I have just trusting that I did it right. I have to be able to prove to myself that I did it right. It's not too expensive. Maybe the first time it is. Maybe the second time it's a little more expensive than you think. By the third time, you already have a library of tests and tools built up, and it will just, again, it'll become a part of your life. It doesn't take too long. It doesn't take too much budget. It doesn't take too many resources. You have to manually test this stuff anyway to make sure that you're doing it right. When you test a form alter, you have to go and log in and hit the form and make sure that everything comes through. And heaven forbid you have states in there, and then you have to check all of that stuff and change such and drop down and make sure that something becomes invisible. We have to do all that stuff every time anyway. Just do it once. It'll save you time, it'll save your testers time, it'll save your clients time, and it will make you a better developer. So we'll talk about some tools. For simple browser automation, Selenium has by far the widest user group. It's pretty simple. You get an add-in for Firefox. It gives you this little recorder. Actually, we were talking about live demos. I wasn't going to do this one, but let's do it. All right, so Selenium, we are recording. Let's go to the Googs. We'll do a little bit of browsing. Do scrolling. Where's my thing here? What time is it? It doesn't matter. Giving back to Drupal, that's a good one. And now we can see all of the stuff that we had started doing. We opened a path on our base URL. We typed something, Twin Cities Drupal Camp, and Twin Cities Drupal Camp Behat. We clicked and wait on this accepted sessions. We clicked on this exact match of a link. And then in here we can do stuff like, let's learn how to use a mouse. And then let's assert that we don't have the body text. Oh, I'm so recording. Well, nevertheless, it's super easy to use. What's going on? Let's just repeat this. So now I'll replay this. Let's narrow this back up. It does both of our searches. Oh, I tried to click something and I couldn't find it. There's no target. So, fantastic example. Nevertheless, this is why I don't point testers to use Selenium exclusively to regress their entire app, because it's a little flaky. Any record and playback, any variance on it kind of breaks it a little bit. But again, it's fantastic for simple automation stuff. We had a site with a commerce, shopping cart special order conditions, and in order to get through to the point where we could hit the rule every time, just recorded a quickie Selenium script and ran it and got to that point, and then started our testing of that particular rule. There's Shii, which actually is a slightly better record and playback tool, but the community is terrible. It's a small company, and do we all go to the keynote this morning when we saw basically the don't be a jerk sort of rule about the community? They don't really follow that. They're very much it's in the manual. I'm not answering this. Like, really, you work there? So I have a hard time really recommending it. But the record and playback is a little more complicated, but much more reliable. The custom scripting inside it is all JavaScript based, so that's nice. QA can record a script, and then dev can use it later on for reuse. Like we had a pretty great system for a while, where instead of trying to do this sort of complicated, here are my 14 steps to reproduce, they would record it and then send development the script, so we could see, okay, this is exactly how we do it. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Behat, my favorite. Behat uses a natural language syntax called Gherkin, and really tests are divided up into three parts: a given, a when, and a then. Given. Who here has any background in Behat or Cucumber at all? Okay.
Hi, Behat.
All right, so a given is the set of preconditions or assumptions or navigation steps in order to get to the point where you can start testing an action. The when is the action itself, what you're doing to make something happen. And then the then is the results, so you can see what actually happens when you do the thing. Let's look at an example. So given that I'm an anonymous user and I'm on the home page, I should see a login button, but I should not see a logout link. And we know from the Drupals that this, for the most part, is what we're going to see. I have a login button. I do not have a logout link. Given I'm logged in as a user with the authenticated user role and I'm on the home page, then I should not see a login button, but I should see a logout link. I don't know if I actually have a user on here. So now I have a logout link and no login button. And this is our expected behavior. This is what we expect it to do. And now for something a little more controversial. Behat 2.5, Behat 3.0, Drupal Extension 1 versus the Drupal Extension 3. I kind of prefer 2.5. And I know that it's not the new hotness and it's not the latest and greatest, but the thing is, it is so much easier to align and reuse all of the stuff you need. Behat 3 is much more object-oriented, and it's all custom context. The problem is you have to declare those custom contexts in your Behat YAML configuration file. It doesn't automatically pick them up for you, which is mostly fine. We're like, what are you talking about? Yeah, fine. You add it to the Behat. But the thing is, when you're working on a team with 6 or 7 developers, and we're all doing new development, and I need some particular context that will do something, I now have to alert the rest of my team, hey, I made a new context. Remember to add it to your Behat YAML or your tests are going to fail. Behat 2.5 just made it a lot easier. It's a little hackier, it's a little cheatier maybe, but it's not in a way that really breaks my sensibilities. It's a lot easier to do. And I've heard the argument, if you're in Drupal 6, then use Drupal Extension 1.0. For 7 or 8, you got to use 3. That is wholly incorrect. I've had tremendous success in big Drupal 7 sites with the Extension 1.0. And then, I've been playing around with Drupal 8 on both of them, and I still find it easier to Behat Drupal 8 with the 1.0 extension. Here is some of the stuff that the Behat 3 makes you do that you don't have to do in 2.5. In 2.5, you have a custom feature context, and you get to write all of your code in it. You get to put in, class-level variables, and functions can, of course, call other class-level functions, and it's all beautiful. Here, really, it makes my solid principle-oriented heart all happy that everything can be single responsibility and more atomic, and it's fantastic. But if I have some particular context that needs something out of Mink and it needs something out of Drupal, I have to then declare and gather in a before scenario each one of those custom contexts and tell Behat to gather them all for me, and then make sure that, it's all regular object-oriented stuff, like making sure that something is public and that it has an accessor and whatever. It's a lot to orchestrate when you're really going for reliability and speed. Here's more annoying 3.0 stuff. The documentation, this is what actually kept me off of 3.0 for a little while. The documentation is still not exactly right. The 2.5 documentation is solid. But the 3, not so much. For instance, it doesn't, what it tells you about setting your default formatter is wrong. I had to dig into the PHP code to figure out how to set this. But in Behat 2.5, it's a little entry in your Behat YAML file, and it's correct in the documentation, and you set it, and you never have to worry about it again. There's a gist for this, by the way, in case anyone wants to go to progress like I do, so you don't have to have the giant script full of text and just have the nice little green dots. That's how you do it. I have a gist for it. It's up. The Drupal extension for Behat is life-changing. It's incredible. It effectively bootstraps its own version of your Drupal site and lets you call anything. Any API, any function in any module, anything you can do from inside a custom module, you can do from your API Drupal extension tests. It's incredible. I actually kind of cheat in another way a little bit, and I have started using Behat for actual unit tests. And there's a little bit of laziness there. You know, I could use PHP spec, PHP unit, whatever, but then that makes the rest of my team have to have another testing tool under their belts, and there's another testing step that they have to do in order to verify stuff. So I just have these unit tests written out as custom steps in Behat tests, and it goes through and runs through all of my stuff. And an example of that is, this is how you put together a custom step. So remember our givens, whens, and thens. The Behat language itself, the step definitions, there's no real difference between a given, a when, and a then. Really, it's for you to be able to read it. So we can say, given I'm viewing the whatever term, and then it automatically knows that this is variable, and then it's going to pop it into there. We can say, given I'm viewing the Behat term, it actually does a taxonomy get term by name, pulls out the first one, gets the URL, and then browses to it. And that's it. Yeah?
So just so I understand, from the given line that is in another file, that code is just automatically generated?
It will generate that for you. It'll give you the signature of your method. You have to fill it in. But yeah, whenever it encounters a step that it doesn't know how to do, it'll spit out. It'll say, hey, I've got this given I'm viewing the whatever term, and that doesn't exist. To make it, here's your snippet. And then you can paste it into your context, and then fill it in and make it do magical things. I'll actually get to showing that in a few minutes, so we can see how it all works. Then a user by name should have a role of whatever the role name is. So I get this username, and I do this magic in my Behat with this FixedStep argument. What FixedStep argument was actually meant to be to begin with was fixing some regular expression sort of broken-y nonsense in the way it normally parses it. And I looked at that and realized that is a fantastic place to do some variable injection. So like I can do stuff like, let's pull some up. Sorry, the screen resolution changed all my window sizes. Let's get our Mink context. And here, is it big enough to read? It's kind of small. All right, I'll read it out loud. So things that I check for are at timestamp, and what that does is it puts in every time the context constructs, it grabs a snapshot of time, and then every time I call it, that means every time I call it with at timestamp in one particular scenario, it'll have the same at time value, so I can check to make sure that things are unique, and the things come through and load and return the way I expect. I have a today date, which gives me a date in a particular format, a tomorrow date, current month short. These are real tiny ones. Then I've got one uname. So whenever I have at uname in here, it'll go figure out who the logged in user is, and then return the name for whoever that happens to be. Or no, it returns the ID. So it comes out as I would do at uname, and then a square bracket, and then a user, admin, and then a square bracket. It would go and process this, figure out who the user is, and then, in this case, return 1, and then inject that into wherever I have. I have something where I can check a node ID based on a title. I've got the current user ID, so it goes through the context to figure out who's logged in. So I can affect quite a lot of uniqueness and control over my tests and what I'm creating and what I'm seeing with these. Can we see it now? Yeah, Darkula doesn't show up, and of course, it's PHP Storm makes it difficult to just make the thing blow up. I could blow up the code window, but then all the rest of it doesn't get bigger. Behat can also automate drush. So here's another, I should have the role of, and instead of going through the Drupal API and doing a user load and then user roles, it will actually call drush with user information and then parse it and make sure that it has a role. And that is also fairly amazing. It is fantastic for continuous integration. This is ideal. Really, this is kind of what we should all be shooting for. And there's other long talks. There's entire conferences about the magic of continuous integration. Basically, what it means is every time you commit or on some sort of a schedule, it runs. It sets up a new server, deploys your thing, your site out to it, sets it all up, runs all the tests against it, and then lets everybody know when you have a test that fails. We use Jenkins a lot at Breakthrough. We've used Travis a few times too. I've used Hudson, which is where Jenkins came from. Does anybody do any sort of CI? Again, your confidence level will skyrocket once you start doing this, because you realize that you don't really have to be involved in the QA deployment process. You don't have to post a build for QA. QA can go and see that tickets for stories or defects or whatever have been moved over. They're dev complete, ready to be tested, and they can look at the continuous integration box and say, oh, last night's build, all the tests passed, so good, let's pull that, and then they can deploy their own site with just a click. Like, they don't need to be tech ops people. They don't need to do anything aside from make the click and then wait until it deploys. It's fantastic. All right, live demo. I went on for a little bit. I'm almost out of time. So, again, the repo that has this site and the tests in it is there. Having a Behat 2.5 alongside a Behat 3.0 in normal life is okay, but PHP Storm gets very confused because it tries to do all your class mapping and everything for you, and when you have two sets of libraries that really have the same namespace, it wigs out. So I have a branch for 2.5 and then a branch for 3.0. Let's have a look. So it's just this real simple time entry thing. It's got a calendar that defaults to the current date. It has a previous and a next. You can log in and do some stuff. And then if we look at the actual tests, I'm sure these are really hard to read. So we have a feature. Now, a feature is an actual test file. What a feature represents is sort of any feature of the site. It's a testable bit of functionality that can be broken down into multiple pathways through it. So a feature is broken down into scenarios. So here, for instance, this feature, we're testing the calendar on the home page. And one scenario is that we test that it has the month view. We test that when we add an entry, that it appears on that calendar. And that's all this particular test does. Here's one for viewing client terms. There's a client vocabulary, and when you can click into it, you can see time entries associated with that particular client. So here we have here's a term with no entries. Here's a term that has an entry, and the time entry that we've added should appear on that client page. We've got the same thing for project terms. So here's a project that doesn't have any entries in it. Here's a project that has a time entry logged against it. Here we're checking actual site info. So it just fills my heart with joy about how magical the Drupal extension is, because all I'm doing is I'm an anonymous user and I'm on the home page and I want to see this particular text, and that's a fine way to do it. Check your site name. I want to see it on the home page, but we can actually really test that the site name is the Twin Cities Drupal Camp Time Tracker. If I come in here, I have a variable context that I've written, a custom context. I'm extending a raw Mink context, and then I have this custom step in here. Then the site name should be with a variable. And it has generated me out, this sort of scaffold of a function. And I'm doing a variable get of site name, and then if it works, if it's the same, it passes. Otherwise, it's going to throw an exception saying the site name should be such and such, but it's actually something else. If we run that, we'll see that this will pass right now. See? Bing, pass. Now, if I change that and run it, it'll fail. See? The site name should be Quad Cities, but it's actually Twin Cities. And I'm doing that all through actually using Drupal and checking that variable get. Let's change it back, make sure that it still passes. Good. We're getting what we expect. So if we go ahead and run these things, out from your command line, I've got, this is all Composer set up. It's all installed. And then I can just run Behat. It'll go through my features folder, figure out every feature that I have, and it will run them all. And now I have this set for the what I think is the most useful form, which is progress, which just gives you a green dot for a pass, or a red F, and blue dashes for a fail. Once it fails, it skips the rest of the steps in that scenario, and then we'll start up with the next one. So we can see that I have one failing. It'll run through. I think I only have 80 or 90 steps on this particular project. There it goes. All the green dots are so lovely to watch. So, and this is a dev desktop thing. Unfortunately, dev desktop does sometimes wig out with a whole bunch of real quick kind of concurrent requests like a test can give it. And occasionally it'll throw you a 500 when it's trying to do something like login. And I don't run any of my actual CI stuff on Dev Desktop. I have proper servers for that, but locally, most of the time it's good, and just occasionally, unfortunately, you have to rerun. See it past that time, so it's not wigged out anymore. So now this is the Behat 3.0 branch. And we have a custom Drupal context, which again has to go through this rigmarole of gathering up the extra context that it needs because it needs stuff from Mink. Like here, we check to see if a user is logged in. Now, I think that the way the standard Drupal extension does a login check is kind of terrible. I need to submit a patch for this. What the stock one does is here, I'll show you. It's not finding it. Spinning. What it does is we see that I have a fine CSS on logged in because when we're logged in, Drupal will put a logged in class on the body, and if you're not logged in, it puts a not logged in class on the body. You have to be like really theming on purpose to go and change those class names and take them out. What it does by default is it checks for a log out link. Well, we don't always have that, or sometimes it's hidden, or if we've got stuff that uses single sign-on and it doesn't really give you an opportunity to log out. So rather than checking for an actual log out link, I'm verifying that logged in class on body. So I've overridden that. I overrode the creating nodes function. So when I am in calendar entries, we can see here that I can just generate content right from the test. So here, I'm making up 4 time entry nodes. And here they have a title. Here's the author. And again, this is set to one of my little magical variables here, this at current UID. So up here, we can see given I'm logged in as a user with the authenticated user role. So it whips up a user and authenticates him, logs him in. And then now I can use that guy's UID with this variable every time I do it. I can put in a date, align them to their their term references. I can't scroll because it's actually off the screen. It's still off the screen. These projectors are not as wide as you'd think. It's still off the screen. Whatever, there's just some more fields over there. So normally it doesn't go through that FixedStep argument thing all the time, but I need it to because, again, I inject my little magic in there and make that happen. So I have a custom mint context that takes one of those table nodes, those pipe delimited tables, and then does the fixed step argument inside every one of them, and then sends it back through its normal parent create nodes. I've got a custom message context, which I don't remember what I was doing with it. Oh, right. It's for checking messages, but with the step argument change in there. My mint context is what actually does that fixed step argument. And I've got an entity context, so I can check fields. I can check that fields don't exist, because we've got stories like we had such and such a content type. We've changed our workflow, so let's remove the assigned to editor column, and just now any editor can get to it. Well, again, whenever that comes up, we write a test to make sure that that's repeatable and that it always happens. So we will check that the field doesn't exist. Testing for negative conditions can be a little bit of a slippery slope, because you hear this, you hear the ATM example all the time. Well, given I'm a customer of the bank with an ATM card, and I put it into the ATM, when I withdraw $50, then my balance should be down by $50, and it should give me the money. And then everybody says, well, but what about all the negatives? And it shouldn't take $50 out of this person's account, and it shouldn't give you $100. You can only test for so many negatives. And really, if your requirements are good enough that it does what it expects, you can't test for infinity. So test to your requirements. And when you have something that's a negative requirement, test to a negative requirement. Another key mindset to behavioral tests is that no one test should ever affect the outcome of another test. So this is one that I use here a lot, given I have no entities of type and bundle. And again, this isn't really businessy speak, this is sort of programmery talk. So we can say, given I have no entities of type node and bundle article, and then I can check that the list is empty, and then I can add an article and check that the list is there. Then I can add a sticky article and make sure that that comes first in the list. And then when I'm done, the test automatically tears down all the things that it creates. So if it creates users, it creates nodes, it'll clean them all up. But sometimes when you're walking through, if you're automating filling out like a web form, for instance, you're filling it out, and then it's going to save your results. It doesn't automatically clean that up because it didn't create them. Your test created them. So I have something in here that lets me clean that stuff up. This one is especially useful. It writes out a dump of your page after it fails. Where's my... Go test 3.0, failures. And then these are time-stamped and recorded with what feature it was, and we can see that here it didn't give us what we wanted. This is where it thought that it could log in and it couldn't. Well, I'm actually out of time. I didn't really have time to get into the 2.5.3.0 comparison, but you can do that right on your very own by grabbing that repository, which lives here. Sure, go ahead.
So if you're going to make custom when condition or when, so how do you map it? Some of are already there, like when I'm logged in a user. So if I want to give a custom when I have certain execution feature, so how do you map?
I don't understand what you mean by map.
Like you have all the when it's when I'm a logged user.
Okay.
So if I get say when I'm logged user as this certain logo or certain something.
The extension gives you a whole bunch to start with. So like here, I'm logged in as a user with the such and such role. Given I'm an anonymous user. Are you asking how Behat parses these things?
Yeah, if I want to create custom, even custom they are there, but yeah, something like this.
When I run it,
Yeah.
it'll tell me, look. It tells me, look, I have a missing step. Please define this snippet. So it says, given I am Santa Claus, and then
This is
and then it gives you a pending exception in here that you have to fill in with real code. But I can take this put it into one of my custom contexts.
And what about the arguments for this function?
If I had done one like this, so, well, first it gives us the exception that I just threw.
It works.
But then let's pull that out and run it again. And we can see PHP Storm is complaining because that's not a real step. But Behat will generate it for us. And it generates it for us with the arg. And then you pass it right in. It'll interpret all of that for you. It has a very rich regex processor, and it's really good at figuring all that stuff out.
This is what I was trying to learn.
Any other questions?
So
Sure.
I'm really new at this, so I'm trying to figure out, it seems like a lot of code to write. So at what point do you decide when it's valuable to start using this environment? How much work did you have to do to build that code? How much time did it take to do that?
Let's see. How much time did it take? It took less time than it would have taken to manually test each feature that I wrote when I needed it. That's kind of a cop-out answer. But I mean, I guess if you would add up all the time that it took to put all this stuff together, like the 3.0 version of this test site I built, I finished it yesterday. I'm not supposed to say that if I'm a presenter. But yeah, I mean, it gets to the point, you know, when you're really into it, it's just like writing a custom module. It doesn't take any time at all. The first time, you know, it could take a little bit of time to figure it out, but the Drupal Behat extension gives you so many steps, and you know, it gives you such a starting point. Like, it'll let you create users and create nodes and create terms and navigate to pages, and you know, it's just that as I keep using it, as I keep spinning through it, I keep iterating, I keep needing more stuff. So I just keep writing stuff. Like, I've got steps in, and they take time. They end up, you know, stacking up. Like that site I've got with, you know, 18 or 20,000 steps. That's 2.5 hours to run them all. So eventually you start looking at ways to speed that up too. So now I've got a custom step in a context in here to analyze views. So I'll authenticate as a user and then check that such and such a view has such and such a condition, and it'll just do like a view, embed view, and then check the output of it, rather than walking through the entire site and navigating and then pulling stuff out. So you start developing your tool set as you go, but I use that tool set in every project that I do. So again, I understand what you're asking, but I can't not say it in a way that it doesn't take negative time.
So basically, the first time compared to manual testing and automated, they may not be much different. But when we are using repetitively, suppose an application undergoing sort of maintenance,
Continuous integration.
then
Continuous integration, or just test it twice, 2 days in a row. Which would you rather do? Test it manually Monday and then again on Tuesday, or write a test Monday and then execute it again on Tuesday?
yeah, that is repeatable testing.
Yeah.
You know, but first time, whatever the effort taking, it is almost same. Am I right?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is close to the same, because again, when you're a dev writing a feature, you test the feature, or at least you mostly test the feature before you.
Because as a consultant, I am going to a client. Okay, this is the application, you create it and give it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Then I have to either manual testing or automated. There is no difference.
Exactly.
But I have to use this, you know, after 2 months, I have to make changes, or after 2 days.
Right.
Then the value add I can explain.
Exactly.
And you might even forget what you did.
What?
You might even forget what you did like 2 months back.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it helps you. It helps you forget that stuff. I don't have to remember exactly how to test some particular view and its wacky filters. I've already done that, and I only have to worry about it again when it breaks.
As far as custom is concerned, writing a test case or presenting in detailed information to this kind of tool, there is no much difference.
I don't think there is. Yeah.
Like, people go automated, like, who would go?
Yeah, the definition of automated is repeatable. Then that's the value addition.
And again, it's like compatible with Agile and Scrum because generally so many people they will come with like more idea for the Scrum, what you should consider.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
even like the perfect website, you can break it. I looked up pipeline.
Integration.
That's why I know.
Yeah.
I like fooled them like they give an option of you can extend your stay for next 2 days. So what I did, I was trying to get the best price and I booked in the future. First I did like, I booked in the future, extended, and then the test was missing, like if you reverse it, you can go back also. So
Got it.
you can fool them twice.
Yep.
One question.
Sure.
There are multiple developers are working on the unit tests created, and after that it goes to the system testing and integration testing. So, is there any value add these kind of tools will bring? Suppose that the unit testing, the test case is developed, and the integration, the same thing.
I think that there is,
Take it
because,
forward.
I mean, really, not to sound like a jerk, but, you know, how many times have I gotten a commit from another developer, and I look at it, and I'm like, did this ever work? How did you make this happen? But again, now, if there's a test for it, they get to prove to me that it did. All right, I'm way out of time now. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. If you have any any questions or whatever, you can get a hold of me and comment, email, and then again, please download the little sample test tracker thing and play with it and break it and give me questions on it.